Yep, I can see.
Okay. So I brought a couple of these just for the meeting. The double panel strike cards, zines.
Hell yeah, that was a great idea.
These are dope. I love these.
Hmm.
I wanted to, so I'm gonna bring it up to the group chat, see what the fine details, because it's a full zine. It just happens to be
Hmm.
double sided on 2 panels, but I wanted to bring it to the group chat, see what we could add or remove, or because I want this to be the flagship design, something that we push, because this is it's unique. It's the
Hmm.
double panel,
Absolutely.
and I even brought the one that I signed. I carry around this one with
It's
me
a
a lot.
little piece of history right there.
I know, so I keep the one that I signed because I made it,
Hmm.
and then some blank ones, and then I like the
Yeah.
line sketches, Michael Parenti, Che Guevara, big old revolutionaries, philosophers.
It's a certain type of aesthetic with it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And then I think in my little fanny pack I have some. Well, I don't know. I haven't. I go through these. There's a bunch of General Strike ones in here. No, I have some Panther Party
That was
10 points.
oh yeah.
Panther Party. I don't know if
Also, I talked to Addo, the chairman for the Panther
yeah,
Party.
yeah, yeah.
They did apologize. Those were the most updated points.
Okay, because I took it straight from the
So we're
website.
just waiting. Yeah, they probably just overlooked them. But right now we're just waiting on the BPP to
Yeah,
approve. But the CPPs are definitely good to go.
cool. Okay, I'll put those up on the shop. The
Hmm.
Panther Party 10 point, along with these, and I'll make some stink about these. That way, we have a good selection of designs. But since this is recorded and I only have a limited amount of time, we're just gonna get right into it
All
after.
right.
So these are recorded. So if you wanna let people know where to find them, they're on our YouTube. Or if you're watching on the YouTube, hello. But today we're gonna be talking about a very beautiful thing on this fine Christmas, on this fine hyperconsumerism holiday, and it is the notions of Thornstein Veblen, a book I read a while ago, about, and the whole topic of the book, the theory of the leisure class, and the leisure class is all about conspicuous consumption and how you consume conspicuously, very obviously. So when we talk about conspicuous consumption in the topics of production in a society, it is not consumption like food. It could be food, but it's not just about consuming and literally eating, or it's about having. So consuming is about having stuff. So I'm in a car right now. This technically is a portion of consumption. It is a type of consuming. I have this car, but the types of consumption that is conspicuous, it is the purpose of having stuff to show off. It is the purpose of having stuff to show that you can consume. So conspicuous consumption falls under the canons of status, because when you consume, especially in a capitalist society, is where the theory was born out of, just like socialism. Conspicuous consumption is this process, this phenomena that people spend money, have things, make things, do things in society for the point of a social status, and the social status is backed up by the phenomena under that consumption, the means of producing that consumption. So we always go back to the means of production as a economic philosophy, even in our most social philosophies like conspicuous consumption. So conspicuous consumption is founded on the means of production, but this specific type of producing is the means of producing this very obvious consumption. And I always go to this example of the Lamborghini, the big house or the mansion, and then the wife, the trophy wife, and then the white picket fence, the family, the nuclear family, basically. That is itself the entire nuclear family, the house and Lamborghini. That's all conspicuous consumption. It's very obvious that that individual has a nice car, has a nice house, has a nice family, and has nice property. It is a show. It is conspicuous, and it is a type of consumption. It is obvious that that person has it. But all of these subsistence is already fulfilled at that high level, even at a low level, even if someone didn't have a Lamborghini, didn't have a nice house, doesn't have a nice family, and whatnot. There still remains a level of subsistence that is being maintained, but now conspicuous consumption just brings that to another level. It brings that to an excessive or a superfluous level. There's just some sort of like extra qualities about this type of consumption that makes it conspicuous. And so the types of conspicuous consumption we see nowadays, because it evolves over time. When Thornstein Veblen was talking about conspicuous consumption back then in the 1800s, his conspicuous consumption in that era was kind of like lords like. It was like an homage to feudal times, very flaunty big dresses. It was the carriages. It was, if you had an automobile back then, because it was very rare, that was conspicuous consumption. You basically had the means to consume a lot, but it didn't hinder your financial status, or it didn't hinder your ability to consume. You're basically telling everyone, hey, I got a $2,000 shirt and I can afford this $2,000 shirt and you can't. That's basically the idea of conspicuous consumption. Back then, it was carriages, horses, land, businesses, textiles, your like the things that you had. Now, I would assume just conspicuous consumption is just basically having a lot of things to show for it, but that showing makes people look at you and they say, oh wow, that guy can, like, in these terms, can consume like that. They can consume and have all of these things without having it hurt their financial status or ability to consume like that. So conspicuous consumption isn't just about having things for yourself, it's making it obvious that you have things for yourself. And other people have to see that you have this such stuff. So it's like you sitting in my RAV4, my Toyota RAV4, next to a bunch of Teslas. Right? They're obviously consuming a lot more than I am, even though that the types of consumption that we see all does the same stuff. In my Toyota RAV4, I can get to point A to point B just as normal or just as good as a Tesla. But the fact that it is a Tesla, or the fact that it is a nicer car that is being consumed or having of, that represents a status. And the status is always layered with that notion, the understanding that that person can consume. It's not always about that person has, it's always the means of production, the layer of production under that consumption. They are able to produce a consumption like that. They are able to, because not everyone can afford a Tesla, not everyone can afford a Lamborghini, not everyone can afford a nice house, but everyone can afford, all right, in this little experiment, a means to transport. And that is the fundamental, the subsistence. So, like, when we talk about food as well as we talk about consumption, food, right? Not everyone can cook you up a good food. Not everyone can cook you up, a 5-star Michelin chef meal. But everyone can get this sort of subsistence, this means, this having of energy. Now, conspicuous consumption in this context is like 5-star Michelin restaurant. You go to a Gordon Ramsay restaurant, you go to like pay $500 for a plate. Is gonna be the same amount of food that you consume for like a $5 meal that you would cook up and get some from a Walmart or a Target or like a grocery store that you can cook yourself up. In that same amount of time that you consume your food, the person doing it for $5 is not doing it conspicuously. They're doing it incognito, inconspicuous. They're just eating, right? They're not telling everyone, "Hey guys, I have this." And conspicuous consumption in the 2010s, right, was the Instagram, was the take a picture of your food. That was modernized conspicuous consumption, at least a decade ago. That was people showing off, "Hey, I have this means of eating, and I have this means of," and they show it off. That's the type of conspicuous consumption that we are talking about when we talk about like this type of consuming in this society, in this capitalist society. And the entire book of conspicuous consumption, the theory of the leisure class, is based off of the type of production the society is living under, or living over, I guess, as a foundation. So could we only get conspicuous consumption, just like how we only get socialism, because of capitalism, because of the ways that is produced, the privatized means of production and how we produce in our society. So because we produce so privately in our society, the means at which, and of course all of the canons and the history that comes with having such a status, like the feudal times nobility, or the current times, corporatizing your lifestyle, all fall, or I guess all make the canons of conspicuous consumption. Because when you consumed conspicuously back then as a noble, it was very flaunty. I had all these very, very nice, ornate, very delicate dresses, gemstones, all over, just lacing the entire garment. conspicuous consumption in feudal times, even more so, carriages, horses, land, castles, all of these grand arch, and then like these, I would say, most useless structures built just for the nobility. That was noble. That was a feudal conspicuous consumption. Capitalist conspicuous consumption is that I can buy a lot and I can have it all. I can have a lot. I can have it all because of my whether it be a job, whether it be your capital, whether it be your savings, whether whatever, it doesn't matter the source at which comes from. There, it does matter a little bit where the source of your money comes from, but that falls under a second, like it's like secondary to the entire scheme of conspicuous product or consumption. So that second layer, more highly regarded, is inheritance, because what you have to understand about conspicuous consumption and consumption as a theory on top of the capitalist mode of production is that the capitalist mode of production encourages people to not work, to not labor anything that they sow. So basically, billionaires have this perfected down to an art. Capitalists have this perfected down to an art. Kings and queens back then had this perfected down to an art. You basically did not labor, but you gained everything anyways. So basically, when you own a business, like a big business, you're a corporate, billionaire, millionaire, or whoever, CEO, you don't work proportionally to how much you earn. So basically, you don't work at all, but you still get your millions and millions of dollars in stocks, salary, bonuses. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter your source of how you gain your means of subsistence or your money. You're basically your liquid capital. That is basically just a vessel for you to go out and consume. Tell and show people that you have the means to consume for yourself. So like iPhones every year, right? I owe myself an iPhone. I have this one for about 3 years, 3 or 4 years, because I have stopped myself some conspicuous consumption of buying an iPhone every year. But that is basically what's happening when we see iPhones, the past couple years. I've seen less people buy them now, but there's still obviously people buying the new iPhones every year. And that is a form of conspicuous consumption. It's having the latest and greatest, having the things, having the most expensive things as well. So when it comes to conspicuous consumption, it goes in different classes, and the theory of the leadership class goes into your different classes and how each class consumes. And each class consumes like the lower, middle, but basically the working class, the barbaric class, or the leisure class, the bourgeois class, the ruling class. Two different types of classes, but each detachment of the classes consume differently. And it is based on the social hierarchy that is displayed in society. So basically, the owners of production, leisurely and bourgeois, the ruling class, sit up top, naturally, because they own everything, which is enforced by the state, and the military provided by the state. So basically, you can't just go up and steal something from a Walmart. A state provided police or a privatized, militarized police will come in, be like, hey, don't take that, can't take that, and they'll remove you by force. So we maintain the social hierarchy in many different ways. Half of it is military and the state, and the other half is ourselves. We do this to ourselves, really. It is all the optics, the social hierarchy, the places of what people ought to be in their level, in their little pyramid scheme. So basically, the lower classes, the impoverished classes, sit at the bottom, and the way they consume is to look up at the next levels of their hierarchy. An individual never looks down when it comes to a social hierarchy and consuming conspicuously, because when you want to conspicuously consume, you're doing it for who? For everyone, but more so you're doing it so that you can gain a status. Because when you up front, when you look at the world and when you look at society, who are you going to think that has more money, which is also attributed to more success? The person with the Lamborghini or the person with the Toyota RAV4? Obviously, upon when you look at the situation, the material condition, is the person with the Lamborghini that is more successful. They have more money. They are able to consume as such, and they're able to maintain that consumption as such. Whereas me and my lower F4, I don't consume that much. I try not to consume as much, but we're beings of consumption. We'll consume as we need to. But excessively so and conspicuously, that is where we find the different behaviors, the different types of interactions we get with people, and the very nasty types of interactions, the types of behaviors we get when interacting with these people. A mouthful. But conspicuous consumption and these different levels, they happen when you look up. So the lower classes look up, but what happens when the people on top, where do they look? Up still. Because, and it is said within this book, the Theory of the Leisure Class, it is the people at the top who look up. Because the people at the top, who are the concentrated powers of production and consumption, look towards a divine being. They look towards a being that is external to the material condition, which is where you get your idealized philosophies and your idealized enforcements of those conditions, like of what the desires of what those conditions to be. So they look up towards divinity, God, and it is always layered with this removal of labor. Remove yourself from labor. Do not work for what you apparently don't reap and sow, right? So in the book, he goes on about devout observances and how the types of consumption and observances are like intentionally removed from labor to appease a type of being or to fulfill oneself spiritually. So there's an entire discussion on like religion, like Christianity especially, but devout observances as a general whole to removes oneself both from the material conditions, like the responsibility of one's to the world, to the land, and put it upon someone else's, some other being's responsibility list, a little plate, so that we can pray to, we can appease to, we can help towards. We're always looking towards something. And that is what the leisure class, the bourgeois class, the ruling class up top are looking up towards. Notice how, not all the time, especially recently, but back then, a couple decades to 100 years ago, that the bourgeois, the ruling classes, the leisurely classes, all of these classes of the power and of the, just the consumption, all look towards a divine or a god of some sort, because they're always looking up. And nothing is more up than God to these people. And so when you align your schemes to these types of ways of thinking, you're going to get privatization of the means of production. You're going to get conspicuous consumption. You're going to get a privatization of the philosophy, the mind, the way at which people think. So you're going to get all of these schemes, all of these patterns, all these behaviors when you have these devout observances, enforcements of those privatized schemes. So it's like reactionary schemes as well. So when you go out in the U.S. education system, it is taught a lot to react to things. So even in our times of consumption, we react. And the U.S. education doesn't help us anymore, because in the U.S. education system, we are taught what to think, not how to think, which builds up this type of consumption in our lives, especially around the holidays. So we react. We're not reactionary. We are built and made to be reactionary in our education system. So we're always taught what to think, do this, don't do that. It ought to be this way. It not ought to be that way. Don't, there's all a place always has, or a spot always has a place to be in. Things have their spot, their places. And everything's compartmentalized, segregated, separated, and then all everything has their places. You're building up these vertical relationships at which things have to be this certain way. This is where you get the bystander effect. I was thinking about this a couple weeks ago. I always write it down just to go revisit it back to it. But U.S. and the bourgeois society creates the bystander effect. Why? Because in a bourgeois society, you're always, that's not my job. In a bourgeois society, in a barbaric, savage society, it's hyper individualistic as much as it is hyper consumptive for the individual. So we get the bystander effect. Hey, that's not my job, because there is always someone's place to do such an act. Especially the removal of labor, that phenomena of conspicuous consumption. I'm not doing that. That's someone else's job to do. You get this bystander effect because of the canons of status, the conspicuous consumption, the privatization of production, basically the entire capitalist mode of production, the capitalist mode of thought. How an individual thinks in this society, or in general, really, how an individual thinks, is going to get how an individual does. And so baked within the schemes of this capitalist society, you're going to get that bystander effect, that lacking of help, that hyper individualism, that lack of community, because of how society teaches people to act and be. So in our society, we see people like kind of, hey, that's not my problem. They see a robber, for whatever reason the robber robs, right? The fact that it happens, or the person robs. No one does anything about it. Or when someone is getting assaulted, or someone's bothering someone out in the wild, like, at a bar or at a park, People are like, that's not my problem. I don't know them. I don't want to know them. That's their problem. If I go in there, it'll hurt me. You're always thinking about yourself. So in this society, in this hyper individualistic society, you just want to hands off. Hey, that's not me. And it's also a display of the removal of labor. So we appreciate labor in this community as a general strike. In the majority of spaces, I've noticed there's an appropriation of labor, and that appropriation of labor falls within that canon of status and that conspicuous consumption. Because how do you consume, especially services? Products, not so much. And there's a phenomenon I want to talk about next week called inconspicuous production in relation to conspicuous consumption. And if you're picking up what I'm throwing down, they're like two sides, one side of the same coin, you know. So conspicuous consumption is where you get that consuming just because you can and just because you need to show off for that social status and hierarchy for the fulfillment of self, this idealized philosophy. Inconspicuous production is not knowing how shit is made. Not how, so I can conspicuously consume, right? With my wife, I have this phone. That's conspicuous consumption. How does it work? I don't fucking know. How does the camera take a picture and snap and then have a display? I don't know. How does the screen play? I don't know. Conspicuous or inconspicuous production. It's inconspicuous how things produce, how the light produces off of, how the camera captures, how the my broken case falls apart. Inconspicuous production. How the stuff's happened. I don't know. It's that hands off. I don't know what that is. But what we do enjoy, what the individual does enjoy in this society, is that consumption part, is that having part, is that I have my car, I have my phone. What else is there to life? And that falls under what I believe the canons of anti-intellectualism and alienation. And alienation borrowed from Marx's use of the word alienation. You know, alienation where the worker is removed from their labor. So when the chairmaker makes a chair for a company, they don't go home with immediate pay. They don't go home with any chairs that they made. They don't go home. All they go home with is sweat, some blood, and tears from their labor that they inputted. But they don't go home with any of that. So they're alienated from their profits. They're alienated from the products at which they make. So their hands hurt. Their body sweats. Their mind is, fatigued. But what do they go home with? Fatigued mind, sweaty body, and hurt hands. They don't get anything, any profits at which they are owed or at which they are due for after the end of their laboring day. And it's not until the end of the week, maybe 2 weeks, God forbid a whole month, at which the individual finally gains some some of that profit back to them, some of that value back to their labor. And in this society, it's been normalized very heavily that you must earn a paycheck and stuff. But what does that paycheck do, right? Besides having allow for the individual to consume, because you need to use your paycheck to pay rent, you need to use your paycheck to pay for your food and water, all of your subsistence. And then on top of that as well, you need to use your paycheck to have fun, to do things. This is why around Christmas time, you see a lot of people consuming stuff, even though it's not within their budget. Because we as humans, right, just like every other animal, we like to have fun. We like to do things, but it's not fun to do things when we're forced to do things. So in conspicuous consumption, it allows us to express ourselves as such. So conspicuous consumption, right, the whole entire tone made it seem like it was a bad thing. It's not entirely a bad thing to conspicuously consume. It's excessive consumption that is a particularly bad thing. But conspicuously, you can see that I have an iPhone. I'm not telling you that I don't have an iPhone. That's conspicuous consumption. I'm telling you it's obvious that I'm consuming. But when we talk about conspicuous consumption from the capitalist, the bourgeois side, it obviously is that that guy has way too much money and he's spending way too much on himself when there's kids starving and there's people unsheltered and unhoused and there are parts of the world that are disenfranchised forcibly by their means of consumption, by how they consume, right? So it's like one person having a 20-room mansion and then you have a family of 15 living in a one bedroom, right? That is your excessive consumption. That is your conspicuous consumption, because you can see that the one person and even more the one family, right, of your celebrity status, of your leisure status, your bourgeois class, whoever business owner or whatever, that they have this big ass mansion. They have all these nice 20 cars in their driveway, but they are consuming excessively while there are families out who don't have the same or even more than they need, right? So obviously the rich have a lot more than they need, right? So they don't need all of this stuff to maintain their physical being here. Maybe it helps their mental, which is a dangerous game to play because ideally, like ideals, live away from the material condition so that you get to play around and do whatever in the material or in your ideal world. But materially, understanding that these resources are finite. And so the individual of the conspicuous consumption, that canon of status individual, doesn't understand that we live in a finite world, right? And we also, the individual believes that we live in a meritocratic world where people work hard and then they get what they earn. Like, that's total bullshit. We don't live in a meritocratic world. We live in an oligarchy. We live in a place where it's the ownership of things that matter, not your hard work. Is the owner, and this is where you get your conspicuous consumption. Owning a lot of things is that status, is that power, is that acceptance into society, not how hard you work, right? Because if everyone, if it worked like this, if it worked as if everyone got paid when they worked really hard, everyone gained everything they need work hard, we would not have any problems. All of our problems would just go away because we would be properly compensated and justified in our positions, right? If you don't work hard, you don't get a lot. But if you do work hard, which I'm pretty sure everyone here does, we all work hard, we would be getting what we need. We wouldn't be all getting mansions. None of us, like, not deserve, but no one needs man. We just need a house, right? 2 or 3 beds, depending on your family, depending on the size of your family, depending on the size of your needs, your subsistence, how much the individual needs. One person can just live in a 1 bedroom and then they'll be fine. Introverted, right? All of these little aspects, behaviors of the individual. It depends on the individual how much they need. But of course, when you look at someone who has all of this stuff, and like, there's no way that the one person needs all that, the one family needs all that. A private jet, what do you need a private jet for, right? Big old mansion, big old house, big old lot of cars and whatever. All these traditional conspicuous consumption, and then conspicuous consumption isn't just having things as well. It's also literal consuming, like OnlyFans subscriptions, your subscriptions, your Spotify subscriptions, and stuff like that. Type of conspicuous consumption because you're letting people know, hey, I have this and I can have this. It's like when you consume, you're telling people that you have the ability to consume, which means you have the ability or you have the means, and the source of your money is like strong. It's like a primordial thing. It's like a savage thing. It's like a competitive thing, really. And competition drives all of this. Conspicuous consumption, privatization of production, competition drives all of this because in this social hierarchy, everything's competitive. You're not just looking left and right, you're also looking up and down. But we most of the time look left and right because we're living amongst the same class, whether it be your quote unquote lower class, middle class, upper, rich, billionaire, the bourgeois, working class. You're always looking left and right for your validation because that's the people you're closest to. You look up and down as a competitive scheme to see like where can I go and where do I not? Where can I go? Where do I not go? Where do I not want to go? But you're always looking left and right for your validation. You're looking up and down for your movement. Conspicuous consumption in the society very tiring because you always have to consume. You always have to have the latest and greatest, right? This is not the latest and greatest, but you always have to have the latest and greatest. You have to have all the means of consumption and the means of producing such consumption. So conspicuous consumption isn't just also having things and having your recurring purchases. It's also your job in society, right? Someone's job, someone's labor themselves, how they gain their subsistence into society. How does that all fit within the individual's scheme? So the person's job definitely is consideration in the consumption because in your consumption, in your conspicuous consumption, as you live in a society, what is more impressive, quote unquote? Janitor, stock manager. Now I know in this little group, we fucking hate stock managers, but in the schemes of a bourgeois society, a liberal society, it would be the stock manager who has all of the money, all of the means of consumption, probably wears a nice suit. The janitor, the janitors, the sweeps floors. It's a dirty job. It's a laborious job. Now, notice the differences in labor between the stock manager and the janitor. Conspicuous consumption draws a fine line, and the canons of status and social hierarchy. Stock manager doesn't fucking labor. They don't do anything. They don't fix a car. They don't till their own lawn. They don't clean their own house. I bet all of that labor is done for them, like, it's done. They hire some other people. Janitor, on the other hand, doesn't have that luxury, that leisure to have someone else do all that stuff for him. The janitor probably does a lot for himself, which is great. We love a laboring person, but in the canons of status and conspicuous consumption, the janitor is not a very sought after occupation or a title. It is the stock manager because they manage stock. and stocks are capital, liquefied capital. So you want to be a manager of liquefied capital or capital of some sort, because then you are more closer and adjacent to that removal of labor in that process. So do a little bit of recap. It is supposed to be a half session today. I have to go back to my little mac and cheese that's baking in the oven. So basically, conspicuous consumption was the entire topic of today's session. Knowing that people consume not just for themselves, but to show off of what they have. Conspicuous consumption is not, also your recurring subscriptions, and it is also what you do, how you labor, and how removal of labor is also a part of that canon of consumption. When you remove yourself from labor, you are more sought after. Notice how rich people with their the high status, like those old money people, those old money, they have personal chefs, they have personal driver or private chefs, private driver, they have private pilots for their private jets. Notice how the leisure class and the bourgeois class don't do anything themselves because of this type of conspicuous consumption. They've gone so far to having things as they have people to do stuff for them. So I cook my own meals. I love cooking my own meals. I love driving myself around. If I had a plane, I'd fly myself around too. It's the removal of one's labor from these particular processes. So the rich, the noble have their private chefs. They eat. They literally consume, but they did not make the food at which they consumed. The billionaires need to be at a particular spot, so they have a person drive them there. They did not drive them themselves to the spot they need to be at. They need to be summoned at. They had someone else do it. And so the canons of conspicuous consumption all fall within this removal of labor, the fact that you have this means of consumption, and telling people indirectly that you have a lot of money, or a lot of means to produce that consumption. So basically, the entire session today was that conspicuous consumption. It was a half thing today. For those who are just joining us now, these will be going up. These are zines. They're double panel zines. So the front is a double panel of our 3Ds. We have 3Ds too here at General Strike: decentralization, dissent, and diversify. So for decentralization, we're always looking for a non-hierarchical, a sociocratic type of organization, and where people just do stuff and then stuff happens. It's great. Dissent, against the system. We disagree with everything that the system offers, the capitalist system offers. So dissent, and then of course diversify. We want all races, all occupations, all backgrounds, political and whatnot, to join in the strike that is against the oppressive system, the oppressive mode of production. And then we have just a couple of things I brought around. It was Michael Parenti, Che Guevara, just a little line art, and then some quotes under the was series famous faces, names, and quotes, brought to you by us. It's us. And then of course our standard back of the zine. So very nice short half hour. I just want to thank you so much for being here. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you. And if you're here right now, thank you so much, especially on this fine hyperconsumerism Wednesday. And then I noticed, of course, next week is also the 1st, the January 1st. So we are also going to be doing this half session, because I don't know where I'm going to be next week, but we're also going to be doing this 30-minute half session. And next week's going to be about inconspicuous production. So I got to hop off. Thank you so much for being here, and we're gonna yell more about these zines probably this meeting Sunday. So be there. Love you guys, love every single one of you. Don't conspicuously consume excessively. Only conspicuously consume when you're having fun, and that is all. That is all we're here to do. Have fun. So Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's, Happy Holidays. Thank you guys, and I will see all of you, if not Sunday, next Wednesday. So thank you so much. Happy winter time, happy all of that, and thank you so much. Goodbye.